Good morning, ladies. Very warm welcome to the first masterclass of the series of 3 that I'm offering as part of this program. Today, we're going to be looking at the archetype of Oliver Twist. We're going to be looking at the Beggar Archetype. So when you come on, do say hello, do say good morning, let me know that you're here. And if you're watching later on the replay, then please do hashtag replay, let me know that you're here. And I'm just going to share a couple of kind of practical things first before I get started with this quite juicy, rich module. So the first thing I would really encourage you to do is to grab a journal, if you have a journal. Hi, Lindy. Fantastic. Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for joining me live. I really appreciate you being here. Yeah, I really encourage you to bring a journal if you have one, because I think there might be quite a few points to note down. And I encourage you in general, morning Jess, I encourage you in general in this space that we've created together, this archetype space, to really commit for the next few days to really being here in whatever way that means to you. Morning, Lulu. Just let me know, the rest of you, if the connection is okay, because Lulu seems to be finding that it's going a little bit in and out. But yeah, I really invite you to be here as fully as you can be, as present as you can be, and just allow these teachings to enter your soul. Okay? They go deep, these teachings. They go really deep. Whatever comes up for you along the way, over the next few days that we're going to be spending together doing this dive, know that this is a really safe and held container. I have got you. I am holding you. And everything that gets unlocked, we're just going to hold the intention that we trust it's being unlocked at the right time for the highest good. So allow yourself to make space for whatever comes up, whatever realizations come up about your own patterns, whatever memories come up as we dive into the childhood coding. And just journal. I really encourage you to journal. I'll be setting you some questions to reflect on after each masterclass. And the more you do that, the more you will get out of being here. And I really encourage you to share afterwards when you've done the homework. If you feel courageous, to post in the group and say, this is what it's unlocked in me. This is what's coming up for me. That is healing to everybody, right? When we share what's being revealed to us, so often there's mirrors, there's resonance with other people that were like, oh my God, yes, I was feeling that way too. Or yes, it's also reminded me of this thing, or helped me to get clarity on this other thing. So just know that every way that you contribute actively to being here is for me, for you, for us. The more that I see your journey, the more that I can see what's going on for you, the more my channel opens based on whatever things that you're sending out into the quantum field for clarity on. So it helps me massively, and it helps you, because many of these archetypes are controlling us in quite a shadowy way. So the objective of this class and all these classes is to bring them into the light and see them fully. And I can promise you one thing, that once you've seen them in HD, you ain't never going to unsee them again. You're never going to not see them. So these codes are codes for life. These are codes for life. These are rewiring codes. With many of the beliefs that we hold, they've dropped in so deeply because we've inherited them from our parents, and they've inherited from their parents, and they've inherited them from their parents. We have certain beliefs that we're holding at a soul level because of past life experiences. We have beliefs that have been reinforced through the media. We have beliefs that have been reinforced through the school system, right? We have so many beliefs that largely dwell in the subconscious mind that have been dropped in from all angles. But very rarely have we ever actually made a conscious choice whether we want that belief in our subconscious mind or whether it even serves us for it to be there. Does that make sense? So by bringing them into the light, we then bring choice into the equation, because we then get to choose how we rewire them. Okay? So my first question is, when you think of the beggar archetype, and you can just pop it in the comments as I'm talking, what comes up for you? Just without overthinking it, just quick fire response. When you think of a beggar, what feeling does it bring? Can you locate a feeling in your body? Does it create a fear, nausea, memories, thoughts? Do you feel like you have a kind of aversion to looking at the beggar archetype? It's not the most glamorous, is it? It's not the most glamorous of the archetypes, but it's one of the most powerful ones that has a grip on us. So it's so important that we really dive into this archetype. So please do, if you feel called to share with me, just pop a little comment of, right, so Lindy's saying a feeling of inferiority. Yeah, morning Amanda. I'll glance down as you keep sharing those comments. But yeah, I'd be super interested to know what your associations are before I even start to share on what the beggar represents to you. Jess is saying shame. Yeah, definitely. Feeling too proud to ask and then feeling vulnerable, looking like a failure. Ooh, yeah. Definitely shame comes into it, and definitely vulnerability comes into the equation when we ask for things that we desire, right? Okay. So I'm going to start by giving a definition. Yeah, Lulu, vulnerable feels icky in the body. Absolutely. I'm going to start by giving a definition of what I associate the beggar energy with. So when I think of the energy of asking something with the energy of a beggar, it's asking with the energy of not believing that we are worthy to ask for the thing that we're asking for, right? Or not believing that the other person is either capable of giving that thing to us or wants to give that thing to us, right? So we ask with the energy encoded into the question, I don't believe that this is a reasonable request, or I don't believe that this person can meet this request. And or I've made this type of request before and it's been turned down. So now there's a compound effect going on that I'm bringing to the table with this request or with this question, all of the heaviness of all of the previous times when I've asked similar things and I've not been met or I've not been received. So now it's coded even more with the energy of the beggar, even if it doesn't necessarily look like we're asking with the energy of a beggar, right? So there's an inherent collapsed energy in asking for something with the energy of the beggar. There's almost like a predetermined disappointment, right? Like we're already bracing ourselves for the no. And we're not only bracing ourselves for the no, but we're bracing ourselves for the humiliation that comes with the no. And I think that's one of the reasons why it can be very challenging when we see people begging on the streets who are like in damp sleeping bags with missing teeth and, you know, like just proffering a hand and saying, have you got any spare change? Like, it can be really quite difficult to watch. And at a soul level, it's because none of us are inferior to each other, right? At a soul level, we are all divine beings and we are all equally loved in the eyes of God, right? There is no distinction. But when somebody has strongly assumed the identity of the beggar, there is something somewhat repulsive in that energy because they are inherently giving their power away to you completely. Like they're looking at you with those eyes that are like, if you give me £1, you know, I can eat. And if you don't, I'm fucked. Like that's a huge responsibility to hold when somebody looks at you with those imploring eyes. And that's why it can be really difficult to even make eye contact with somebody who is begging on the street, right? We have to sometimes really dig deep to look in the eyes and meet that level of disempowerment. So very often when we see beggars on the street, we kind of dissociate in a way, or I certainly do sometimes, and think, oh gosh, I can't look at that today. I'm just trying to go to Starbucks, you know, just need to get my coffee and like get to work. I can't deal with that today. But it's this shadowy element of society, isn't it? And I don't know whether you've heard that saying that says, like, you know, none of us are more than sort of three paychecks missing away from potentially being a beggar, being on the street, which is a sobering thought. So the beggar represents a character who has completely surrendered power and control over their own survival and their own existence. And that is fucking terrifying to look at. Hence the aversion. So I just want to say, first of all, well done if you're here and you're entering the conversation, because that means that you're ready at some kind of profound level to really look at this archetype and look at how it might be playing out for you. Because it's easy when we see someone on the street begging to dissociate. Like, that's not me. That person doesn't have any association with me. But if we look at it in a different context, then hopefully we can bridge it in a way that you can start to see how it can apply to all of us in different contexts. So let's imagine that you're at work and you've got to work and something is really, like, you've got some big problem that's really, really bothering you. And you've got a colleague and you see your colleague at the photocopier and you just know that that person is brilliant at giving advice, and you just know that they are precisely the person that can help you with this thing that's really bothering you, right? So to approach that person with the energy of a beggar might look something like, I'm so sorry to bother you. Oh God, I feel like I feel so bad, like asking you help, but like, I've got this thing that's like really, really bothering me and I'm really stressed about it. And I wouldn't normally ask you, but like, I mean, it doesn't matter if you haven't got time. Honestly, I totally understand, but it's just, well, yeah, I'm just really struggling with this thing. And like, I know it's just like not even important. It's not even going to be a big thing for you. And like, you've probably just got loads of other things to worry about and this isn't your, right? We've all asked somebody for support with that energy, right? Just let me know in the comments if that resonates with you, that you've asked in such a hyper apologetic way that you are just completely priming them to say no, and you are almost prostrating yourself on the floor in premature humiliation that you've even had the audacity to ask, right? So we've all done that. We all do that sometimes. We ask for something, but we disown our right to own the question or to own the request, right? We're just collapsing in shame that we've even had the audacity to trouble this person, right? So it's like, but please sir, can I have a couple of minutes of your time? So sorry to trouble you, sir. You know, it's got that energy in it, hasn't it? So to contrast that, let me know if you've ever done this one. Let's rewind, but let's play back the same scenario. So you're at work, you see this person at the photocopier who you just know is the perfect person to handle your thing that you're stressed about and give you the right advice and help you to unlock this problem, right? You just know that they are the right person. As you get closer to that person, you can see they look a bit stressed themselves. You can see they look really quite busy. They probably haven't got time for this, but you don't care because you know that they are the one to help you, and you ambush them and you just go, bah! Right, so this thing's happened, yeah, and I just don't know what I'm supposed to do because I've tried to log onto the computer. It won't let me in. I've got to do this presentation, and I know that you know how to do it. So like, what do I do? And you're just right up in their face, literally having a verbal diarrhea on them about what your problem is. And deep down, you know that there was not an energetic yes from them, but you also know that they're too polite to just say no. So you just insist on their help. That is the opposite. That's the energy of taking without really gaining energetic permission first, or asking for energetic permission first. Whereas the previous example, you're making yourself so low and so small in the request that you're asking with the energy of a beggar. Now you tell me, do either of those energies feel aligned? Do either of those energies feel like a grown-ass woman asking another grown-ass woman for help? Also, you will probably resonate with other people ambushing you, right? Particularly if you're really good at giving advice or you're really good at problem solving. You will find that people will ambush you, and there's an element of energetic stealing there when people take without asking. So the aligned way to ask for support in that way would look something like saying, "Hi Paula, how are you doing today?" Maybe ask them first how they are before you ambush them. And then you might say something like, "I've got this issue. It's a computer-based issue that I'm pretty confident you would probably know how to solve. It probably would take around 10-15 minutes to show me how to do this thing. I'm wondering if that's something you would be available for at some point today. And if so, just let me know what time is good for you, and I will happily come to your room, or let me know what works for you." Can you feel the difference in that third request? I'm not collapsing in shame to be asking for help with this thing. At the same time, I'm not rushing in to insist that this woman helps me and just verbally diarrheaing the problem onto her, hoping that she'll go along with it. I'm giving the other person options. I'm giving them a relative time frame so they know what they're agreeing to. And I'm owning the legitimacy of the ask. That is the key thing that distinguishes asking with the energy of the beggar to asking with the energy of alignment, is you own your right to ask the question. You own the legitimacy of the question. How the other person responds to that is beyond what we can control, but we can certainly control how we ask, right? So now let's bring it into the context of the Oliver Twist archetype. Now, something to be aware of is that if you think of all the books, all the hundreds of thousands of books that have been written over the centuries, why is it that certain books, certain stories get elevated as these iconic stories and then get repeated and repeated and repeated into the collective consciousness? Cinderella is an example of that. We're going to be looking at that on Friday. Oliver Twist is an example of that, right? Even if you've never read or seen any films of any other Dickens novels, rare is the person who has not heard of Oliver Twist. So knowing that character and knowing that archetype transcends generations for hundreds and hundreds of years. What is the key scene in that film is the scene where he asks for more, right? So even if you don't remember the rest of the film, you will for sure remember the scene where he asked for more. That scene has been elevated amongst all the other scenes in the movie, and the story has been elevated amongst many other stories in the catalogue of Dickensian stories. So just be aware that there are certain key things that have been reinforced to us since childhood that have had a lasting impact on our perception of playing in the quantum field. So what happened with, just looking at what Jess is saying, wow, this is really interesting. I was thinking about this. Why was Dickens so pushed in that era exactly? So what happened, and if you feel inspired to watch the Oliver Twist movie again in the next few days, I highly recommend it because you will really start to see what I'm talking about. and there'll be scenes that you've forgotten about that are really quite enlightening as far as this whole dissection that we're doing today. What happens in the film is that there is another child in the dormitory the night before the scene where Oliver asks for more. There is another boy in the dormitory who is pacing up and down all night, to the point where one of the other boys just says to him, for God's sake, what are you doing? Like, just go to bed. You're disturbing everyone. And the little boy, who looks absolutely haunted, says, I'm terrified. I'm so hungry. I'm going to eat the boy in the bed next to me. Now, I don't even remember that scene, but when I watched the film again the other day, that really stood out to me, because that was a pivotal moment in the plot shift in the film, right? Had that not happened, all of the other chain of events wouldn't have happened. Because that boy was so frightened of himself and what he might do, because he was so starving hungry, and they all were starving hungry, those workhouse boys. They were fed 1 spoonful of gruel per day. I mean, it was beyond inhumane, the lack of nutrition that they were fed. And they were working, like slave labor basically all day in these workhouses. So the film then cuts to the following morning when they are in the dining hall, where they are made to say their prayers. They are made to say their prayers and to express gratitude for this bountiful meal, right? So they're all being fed a single dollop of gruel, and they are forced to say their prayers of gratitude for the bountiful meal. And on the wall it says, God is love, God is truth. That's engraved in the wall behind where the boys are sitting. Now, what's been decided amongst the boys is that they are going to draw lots. In other words, they have that the boy who was terrified the night before that he was going to eat the boy next to him gets all the other boys in a huddle in the dormitory before they go to breakfast with these pieces of rope. And each boy has to take a turn at pulling a piece of rope. And whoever draws the short straw is the one that has to ask for more. So they've collectively decided that they need to ask for more. And they've collectively decided that one person needs to be the spokesperson. And as fate would have it, Oliver is the person who draws the short straw, right? So in the movie, after the boys have all scoffed down the single dollop of gruel, it goes quiet. And they all look at Oliver. And they don't need to say anything, because it's very clear that what they're saying is the time for you to do this mission on behalf of all of us is now. So there's a very powerful sense of destiny in the Oliver Twist story, right? It's like that drawing the lots represents his destiny. He is actually not destined to stay in that workhouse. So he is given initiation after initiation after initiation throughout the film, each of which elevates him to the finale of the film, where he finally ends up on the higher timeline, right? But he has to go through many twists and turns to get there, as we all do. So Oliver makes his slow pilgrimage up to Mr. Bumble, who is the representative of the workhouse management team, who, by the way, have an adjoining dining area where they are feasting on roasted goose, pheasant. The table is absolutely spilling over with roast potatoes, roast vegetables, all different types of meats, fruit, grapes. They've got wine, they've got everything. And they're making these boys say the prayers to be thankful for this bountiful meal. I mean, the irony is not lost, So when Oliver makes his slow pilgrimage towards Mr. Bumble, and the camera zooms to the child looking up at this big, powerful, overweight figure of authority with his tiny little bowl, saying, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" Obviously, we all know that the reply is, "More? More? The boy just asked for more." You know, there's just this like scandalized response. So the energetic sequence which follows the request for more is he is shamed by the response of, "How dare you ask for more?" He's humiliated because the more courage it takes us to ask for something that we strongly desire, the more scope there is for shame on the other side of making that request if it's rejected, right? Not only is he shamed, he's publicly shamed, then he's beaten, and then he's exiled. So if you think what narrative that story has reinforced to every child who's ever watched it, and most of us have watched it in childhood on, many times, is when you ask for more, you get humiliated, you get shamed, you get beaten, and then you get exiled. Or probably best not to bother, right? So many of the initiations that Oliver Twist is set through are tests of whether he can hold the energetic flip side of asking for more. And anybody, in the coaching industry, for example, who is well established in the coaching industry will tell you that every time you have an up level of some description, whether you go from running programs with 10 people to suddenly running programs with 20 or 50 or 100 people, there is an energetic flip side. There are energetics behind the scenes that can be challenging in order for us to reach the point where we are a match for the thing that we desire, right? Lots of coaches that have made huge amounts of money say that there is lots of energetic work to do before you can handle that extra wealth. So many times we think we desire things, but we don't necessarily have the skills yet to handle the energetic flip side of the thing that we desire, and therefore the universe brings in what we call energetic protection and actually protects you from the thing until you've done the work behind the scenes to make yourself a match for it, because you can handle the flip side. So the flip side for Oliver of, choosing to take on the mission of being the one to ask for more is that he has to endure the shame and the humiliation the other side of it. However, what happens is that Mr. Bumble decides that they need to get rid of Oliver. They need to sell Oliver because they don't want a child amongst all the other children who has the audacity to ask for more. So as you can see, the Oliver Twist story is a kind of mirror of the structures, the power structures that we still live in today, right? Mr. Bumble and his cronies, they represent the establishment. They represent the ruling classes. They represent the aristocrats, the people that run this country, the billionaires, the corporations. The massive mismatch of wealth, or let's say resources, available to Bumble and his cronies versus the workhouse boys is a direct reflection of the mismatch between the people who run the country, who have access to vast amounts of resources, billions of money, billions of dollars of, money, resources, assets and everything else, telling the general population that we should be happy and satisfied that they've given us a couple of £100 towards our electricity bills that are now going to go through the frickin' roof. It's exactly the same energetics. Be happy with what you've got. The first thing that Bumble says after he says, more, when he goes bursting into the banqueting room where the other fat cats are all eating their goose and, grease all over the faces, just slathering it all on, the first thing he says to them is the ingratitude of the boy. So if you think of Melanie's manifestation sequence. For those of you who follow Melanie, for those of you who don't, I will briefly share that Melanie is an incredible coach who runs the Alpha Femme community online, which you can all join if you want to. And the manifestation sequence is gratitude, celebration, desire. Gratitude, celebration, desire. Melanie uses that sequence. That sequence is what has made her a coach that can hold 24,000 people in a Facebook group. She can hold 3,000 to 4,000 people on a live call. She's generated $50 million worth of income from her coaching in the last 8 years, having previously been homeless. So she has mastered the energetics of manifesting, largely based on this really simple code. Gratitude, meaning, first of all, we make ourselves a vibrational match for gratitude of the abundance that we already have, the gifts that we already have, the people in our lives that enrich our lives. This gratitude aspect is vital because that is what brings us into our heart. Appreciation is one of the highest frequencies on the planet, appreciation and love. So the appreciation part opens the heart. The celebration part, so when we celebrate our wins, when we celebrate the abundance that we've been given, that sends a huge message to the quantum field that we are open to receiving more because we celebrate. There's an energy in celebrating that calibrates you even more to be primed to receive the things that you desire. And then you launch your rockets of desire for more. And then you express gratitude when those things come, and then you celebrate again your increased abundance, and then you launch more rockets of desire, right? It's a very simple and beautiful ecosystem. However, we are all humans, and we tend to fall into the lack valleys in between the peaks of the gratitude, the celebration, and the desire. We tend to often identify more with the scarcity of what we don't have than with the abundance of what we do have. But one way to keep a person or to keep a population in a state of perpetual relative lack, where we're all doing jobs that just about pay the bills, we're all up to here with the pressure of having to work more hours than we physically feel capable of doing a lot of the time, because that's the way the system works. You just keep your head above the water. But as long as you throw people a bone, so being given a couple of £100 in your account to try and help with the energy bills when they're going to go up by thousands, is the equivalent to giving Oliver Twist and the other boys a dollop of gruel and saying, there you go, you better be grateful for that. Now, if you have a system where you encourage people to be grateful for very, very little, and you actively shame them when they ask for more, you are interrupting the divine manifestation sequence. Does that make sense? So Oliver and the other boys were being forced to practice the gratitude part, but you bet your ass when they expressed desire, when Oliver expressed desire on behalf of all of them to receive more, they had to batter the shit out of him because they had to make sure that none of the other children got any ideas in their head that they could all just start asking for more and they could all just start rioting and protesting. You know what I mean? That we're not having this anymore. So they had to come down hard on him to stop any uprising amongst the rest of the children. So they had to remove him. So throughout the film, Oliver is met with a challenge or a perpendiculum. And then on the other side of his willingness to meet that challenge, there is an up level. Then he meets another challenge, then there's another up level. And that's kind of how the universe works, right? So it's his audacity / courage to be the one to dare to ask the question that ultimately gets him out of the workhouse. And then the next part of the film, if you recall, if you've watched it, is that he ends up working for an undertaker. Now, to some degree, this is an up level. He's out of the workhouse. He's now an apprentice as opposed to an indentured labourer, aka a slave. The lady who runs the kitchen gives him some offcuts of meat that were meant for the dog. So, you know, although there's definitely a lot of the beggar energy still following him into that next stage in his life, he's being fed better food. He's got slightly better working conditions. He's no longer in the workhouse. Mr. Salbury, who is the funeral director of where Oliver has now been sent to be an apprentice, notices something in the boy's expression, a certain melancholy expression and a certain innocence in his face that he decides would make him a brilliant mute. And a mute was a role that a child could play in Victorian times, where they would lead funeral processions for families in mourning, right? So because Mr. Salbury realises that Oliver would make a brilliant mute, he obviously has to dress him not in his rags anymore, but in finery, in fine clothing, in order to lead the procession. Now, the older boy, who is the other apprentice with Mr. Salbury, is extremely angry that Oliver has been elevated to this status. This is the crab bucket mentality, aka when somebody's rising above their quote-unquote station, collectively, we often have a subconscious crab bucket mentality where we want to drag that crab leg back in the bucket, back in the confinement with the rest of us, right? So it often happens that when people experience an up level, they get a promotion at work, or they start to go into a new income bracket, or they start to have a lot of success with their business, there is a flip side to that. There will be a shadow element of judgment from others, people who don't like it, people who will even seek to somehow thwart that up-leveling, right? Because it's perceived as a threat to the collective, who have all settled for the relative less in favour of not having to face the perpendiculums that come with the desire for more. So this is a choice that we have at a profoundly spiritual level. So the older boy, who is furious that Oliver has been given this upgrade, vows to get the boy hanged. So the next scene, when the two boys are eating together in the kitchen, we see the older boy tormenting Oliver by insulting his mother, who died during childbirth, in order to clearly provoke a reaction whereby Oliver then just jumps on him and starts beating him. Oliver then gets condemned to the basement, beaten by Mr. Salbury. But because the conditions for Oliver in that funeral director's home are becoming intolerable because of the level of hate that this older boy has towards him, he finds the courage to leave, and he decides that he's going to go to London in search of work. This is another perpendiculum. This is another up level, although it takes a very sideways direction, because before he can get to his ultimate home, aka the Mr. Brownlow character, who is the bookstore owner, who is a very middle class sort of well-to-do gentleman who sees the innocence and the good nature in Oliver, and ultimately sees his innocence in the scene where the Artful Dodger and Charlie, the other boy from Fagin's gang, steal from one of the customers in the bookshop, and Oliver, if you remember, gets falsely accused of that, which then sets the whole other plot device in motion for, you know, Oliver to be dragged back into Fagin's den and then ultimately find his freedom. So all the way through the film, Oliver is almost at a soul level. He's choosing the upgrades, and he's choosing the challenges that come along the way with the upgrades. And he very much represents to us the childhood programming of the flip side of asking for more, okay? So one of the things to really kind of understand, if we want to understand why it can be so difficult for us to ask things and own the question, own the legitimacy of the right to ask for the things that we desire, whether it's asking other people or asking the quantum field, is that in childhood, when we desired something, the sequence often went something like this. We desired a pet rabbit, let's say. Or in my case, I decided that I desired to go and see Michael Jackson in concert in Wembley Stadium in 1990, for example. That's something that I recall even now having a really, really, really strong desire to do. So think back to your childhood. Think back of the things that you really, really desired to do, that you ended up begging your parents for, right? So you desired the thing, you felt the full body yes for the thing, you desired to go to that Michael Jackson concert, you could feel the magic, you could almost touch it, taste it, feel it, like this was going to be electric, this was going to be the show of the century, this was coming to London, I wanted to go, you know, this was like all systems go in my body, like all the lights were like ping, ping, yes, we want to go. But when we're children, our parents are the gatekeepers between us and the quantum field, right? That doesn't make them good or bad. That just makes them human. But to understand the energetics of why we have decided it's so difficult to get what we want in many areas of life, hi Cindy, we need to understand the extent to which the parents were the gatekeepers. So we launched the rocket of desire. I want to go to the Michael Jackson concert. Please, can we go to the Michael Jackson concert? My mother does not feel a yes for that request. She feels a no. She doesn't want to go to the Michael Jackson concert. She would be the person who would have to take me to the Michael Jackson concert. For her, it's a hell no. So she says no. Because the desire in the child for the thing that they've attached to desiring is so strong, they start to beg, please, mummy, please, can we go? Please, that'll be really good, please. And usually children get higher and higher pitched when they really, really want something, and they will beg and beg and beg and beg. And they will make all kinds of, like, they'll attempt to make all kinds of bargains. Like, if you please just let me go, I'll be so good. I'll do my homework. I'll wash the dishes. I'll do whatever you want, please. But when we ask for something with the energy of a beggar, we become a repellent magnet. I'm going to say that again. When we ask for something with the energy of a beggar, we become a repellent magnet. Because we have already decided that the other person has ultimate power over us to say yes or to say no. And we've decided that the odds are 51%, 49% in the favour of them saying no. And so we're already priming ourselves for premature disappointment, right? Admittedly, still do this. Do you mean like bargaining, Natalie? Or do you mean like asking with the energy of a beggar? So when the child pleads and pleads, and those of you who have children, you will know this very well, there's something a little bit, you know, repelling, right, about that energy. Please, mummy, please. But it's like, come on, have some self-respect. Stop begging, like get up off the floor. It's not happening. So the child goes from super excited, super attached to the thing that they desire. They make the request for the thing they desire. The parent, aka the gatekeeper of the quantum field, decides it's a no. The child then begs. The child then feels massively humiliated that they're having to beg, but they keep going with the begging because they don't know what else to do. The child says, please, just this one time, please, I'll never ask you again. So the child tries to minimize the request in order to increase the chances of the parent saying yes. Eventually, the parent gets so frustrated that they probably shout at the child, tell the child to go away, tell them they're not ever going to go to a concert again if they're going to whinge like that. Panic. Shit, I've gone too far. Never going to be allowed to go again. Probably just keep my desires to myself in the future. So eventually the child learns, and we've all learned this, it's better to disconnect from the desire than to have the courage to ask for it when the odds seem to already be stacked in favour of 51% no, 49% yes. And Melanie always says, if we can just shift that, when we ask for the things we desire, if we can just shift that to 51-49, it doesn't even need to be like 90-10. It doesn't even need to be a specifically high difference between the yes and the no. But those cosmic scales need to tip just 1 degree towards the yes for us to have a much greater success of manifesting in the quantum field. So think back to childhood. What did you beg for? Did you beg for money? Most of us had to beg for money in childhood, right? Most of us can remember saying, please, can I just have £2? I just want to go to the shop and get some sweets, please, just 20p through. Begged for money. We begged sometimes if you've got siblings and maybe other people in the family were louder, maybe you had to beg to be heard, or maybe if you were the youngest, you had to be begged to be taken seriously. Sometimes you had to beg for attention. Sometimes you had to beg for kindness or empathy if your parents weren't always very kind to you when you were sad. So all of the things that were most challenging for us to get when we were little. Yeah, Natalie's saying for approval. Yeah, I understand that completely. And I want you to make a list later, or you can do it now in the comments if you like, of all the ways that you can remember having to beg. Beg to be allowed to play with your friends. Beg to be let to go out. Beg to go on holiday with somebody else's family. You know, and think of all the times when that was met with a no. That doesn't make our parents wrong at all. They would have had their reasons, of course they would. But what it did do is it made us think that our own access to manifesting the things that we desire didn't work because they were so hard to come by, or we had to fight so hard for them, or we had to get on our knees and beg for them. So we decided that the quantum field was not an easy arena to play in. And so many of us have kind of taken a lot of our chips off the table, so to speak, and we ask for relatively little in many areas of life because we're afraid to ask for more, because in childhood often the message was reinforced to us that asking for more was greedy, it was selfish, it was too much, it wasn't okay. Imagine when we were born, when we were babies, imagine if we'd had our own bank account that had an infinite amount of money in it. And imagine if all the things that we desired, we could have just like tapped our finger and it would have manifested. So imagine if, you know, you were a 6-year-old child and you desired to have a bunny and you had the money and the resources to just pay for it and get one yourself and order it on Amazon or something. You know, if I'd been 10 years old and I'd had access to the internet and I'd had money, tapped and clicked a ticket and bought a ticket to Michael Jackson, I wouldn't have grown up. None of us would have grown up thinking that it was difficult to manifest in the quantum field. So the key point that I want you to understand from this section of this class is that because our parents were the gatekeepers and because they didn't feel the same desire that we felt, we came to the conclusion that our rockets of desire don't work. We launch them and they fall flat, or we launch them and we attach to desiring them and we don't get the outcome we want. But our parents are not the gatekeepers anymore. There are no gatekeepers anymore. And in the quantum field, it actually slows down the momentum of what we're requesting when we ask for slim pickings, when we ask for breadcrumbs. So if we say, I just, like one of my colleagues said to me recently, she's just come out of a 29-year relationship, marriage, with somebody who it sounded like didn't even give her the basic breadcrumbs of any decent, level of love, affection, or anything that you would want to find in a partner. It was an arranged marriage and she put up with it for nearly 30 years. And she's now going through a huge grieving process for like the number of years that she wasted with this kind of begging bowl. Like, just please, can you acknowledge me when I walk in the room? Can you acknowledge that I exist? Can you say something positive? Like, this guy was just giving her nothing, you know, he was not even breadcrumbing her. And she said to me the other day, she said, you know, it's not too much to ask, is it, for just a little bit of affection now and again? And I could feel the beggar energy running through her. Like, I could literally feel that because all she'd ever known was this massive lack in her marriage, she couldn't even conceive of the concept that it's possible to be married to somebody who acknowledges you when you walk in the room, or who goes out to work to bring money into the household alongside you, or who takes joint responsibility of looking after the children. Like, this was an unknown concept to her. And I tried to explain to her, when you ask with that energy, like it's not too much to ask, to occasionally fucking notice that I even exist, you are creating the energetics for the lack to come back to you. And I said to her something that Melanie said recently in the cash program, which was so powerful for me. She said, it's actually harder to be a humble manifester than to be an abundant manifester. Wrap your head around that one, ladies. It's actually harder to be a humble manifester than it is to be an abundant manifester. So when we were kids, what we thought was, if I just ask for a tiny, tiny thing, maybe mummy and daddy will say yes, or just keep asking for this tiny, tiny thing and I'll keep begging. And now what we're doing as grown-ass women is we are applying that same logic to the quantum field. It doesn't work. Your parents and the quantum field are very different beasts, okay? Your parents were the gatekeepers, rightly or wrongly. They had their reasons, but they were the gatekeepers. The quantum field doesn't understand when we say, I really desire just a teeny tiny bit of this thing. The quantum field is like a computer programming system. Like, a no is a no and a one is a yes. It just understands simple codes. Exactly, Lindy, you're reducing what you actually want. So this woman that I'm talking about that had the horrendously unhappy marriage for 30 years, she doesn't really want someone who occasionally notices her when she walks in the room so she can survive off breadcrumbs for the rest of her life. She's a bloody good-looking woman, you know, she's gorgeous, she's beautiful, she's got a lot to offer. What she really wants is someone who, when she walks in the room, says, wow, you look beautiful. You are an incredible woman. I see you. Like, that's what she really wants. She wants that consistent feeling of being seen, desired, wanted, and approved. But as long as she's asking the quantum field for the breadcrumbs, she ain't gonna get anything more than those breadcrumbs, and neither is any of us. Anytime we ask for something and we just say, please, 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 just this once, please, and I won't ask for anything else, please, and I'll do community service, you know. Like, I remember my friend Laura wanted to get pregnant once, and I remember her saying that she prayed and she was like, please, please, I'll never ask for anything else. I'll never ask for anything else. She did get pregnant. I'm quite sure she's asked for more things since then. But we think the quantum field responds to us in the same way as our parents, that if we minimize the request, we're more likely to get a yes. But what we've got to understand is that that is an old coding system that doesn't work anymore. What works is when you have a clean desire and you are not putting any limitations on that desire. If you say, I desire to be abundant in all areas of life, but I'm not bothered about money, I'm not a material person. The quantum field is like, is this a naught or is it a one code? Is it a naught or is it a one code? Do you want abundance in all areas, or are you screening certain areas out because you think it's wrong, because you've been coded to think that that particular thing is wrong. And then you're minimizing your availability for abundance, because quantum field understands either you want to be abundant or you don't. So every time you put a disclaimer or a minimizer in with your request, you are creating resistance. When we learn to stop doing that, those rockets of desire can launch with relatively a great deal more ease and a great deal more chance of success. Now, the things that you begged for most in childhood will still be the things that you struggle with begging for here and now, right? This is just straight up facts, which is why it's super important after the call that you go and journal, like, what did you beg for as a child? So we all probably begged for money at some point. It's just a good example. We begged for pocket money. We begged for a bit of money so we could go out with our friends and get sweets, or we begged for it so we could get a new toy or whatever. So every time we had to beg for money, that created a code that said money is hard to come by. I have to work really hard to get money. I have to do my chores to get my money. If I'm bad, I won't get my money. Like, money was a highly conditional entity, right? So whenever I choose to talk about or do a masterclass on a particular topic, the universe will always give me real life material to work with on that topic. And you may well find that the universe in the coming days and weeks brings you scenarios where you end up going into the begging energy in one way or another. When we go into the begging energy, it doesn't always necessarily look like we've got on our knees, we've shrunk ourselves and we're doing what we did when we were kids, saying please, 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 please. But anytime you ask for something and you believe that it's difficult, or the other person has got resistance to giving it to you, or you're not quite worthy of it, or it's too much to ask, you are encoding your request with the energy of the beggar. So just start to notice when that shows up for you, okay? So it showed up for me recently when I did some yoga classes for the college that I work for as like an additional provision. I did 3 yoga classes. The woman who asked me to do it to support some of the access students with mental health challenges said, what would you charge? I said £80 an hour. She said, fine, 3 classes, £240. Great. I delivered the 3 classes. It would seem like a fairly straightforward thing that the payment would come. The payment did not come. The payment did not come. And I will not waste time with the details of the hoops that I had to jump through to get that payment. But it was beyond anything you can even conceive of for one person to get paid £240. There was about 10 different administrators that needed to sign off different aspects of the request. There was a purchase order that needed to be done. There was invoices that needed to be done. Each thing needed to be signed by at least 4 different people. Any 2 of those 4 people were on annual leave at the point where I was trying to get the thing moved forward, so it kept getting stuck in the chain of events. I had to fill in tax return forms online, send them those, evidence of being self-employed or PAYE. The person who was dealing with it has moved departments, so someone else. You wouldn't believe, right? So every day for about 3-4 weeks, I was like on it, like messaging people, chasing people, reminding people, phoning people, trying to work out who needed to speak to who to get the next step of this chain of events in place so that finally that money could come, right? And it kept getting stuck. It kept getting stuck. And every time I had to ask again for that money, I felt like a beggar. I felt humiliated and ashamed to be having to chase this relatively small amount of money. And I felt very disempowered because I had no power to actually make it happen. All I could do was keep reminding and cajoling people, right? So eventually I subconsciously brought my beggar archetype even more vividly to the surface by sending a couple of emails saying, look, times are really hard. £240 may not seem like a lot to you, but to me, I'm really relying on that money. I really need that money. Like, can you please, you know, have a heart and actually do something to get this payment sent to me, right? And I realized, even as I was typing that I was bringing the energy of the beggar. Please give me the money. I need the money. I did need the money, but I was definitely asking with the energy of the beggar, right? Please feel sorry for me. Please take pity on me, because this might actually make you do something. Nothing was bringing this situation to its conclusion, right? And I was getting angry, I was getting humiliated, I was getting frustrated, I was trying all different techniques. I was trying to schmooze with the guy in finance in case he could somehow override some of the other stages of the events, but he couldn't. And so in the end, and this is what I encourage you to do in these types of situations, I said to myself, call your power back. Because every time we go into the beggar archetype, we have abdicated power. These people have the power to give me my money for my yoga classes or to withhold it. And I am more calibrated to the belief that they're trying to withhold it than I am calibrated to the belief that they're actually trying to help me. And I'm more calibrated to the belief that I'm annoying by asking for it than I am calibrated to the belief that I absolutely have the right to insist. Does that make sense? So once I reminded myself to call my power back, I sent an email and I copied every fucker into that email that had been involved in any of this at any stage. And I didn't mince my words. And I copied senior managers in, right? And any of you who work in environments where there is a power structure, there is a kind of fear of being too forthright in the way we speak to senior managers in case they think, heaven forbid, that we're rude or heaven forbid that they think that we're asking for too much. Again, it's the Oliver Twist coding. So I faced it right in the eye. I copied all senior managers in who'd had anything to do with this sorry ass saga. And I just said, this situation is completely unacceptable. It is completely unethical to request my services, which I've given and provided in earnest, and then for not one of you to take responsibility for seeing this payment through to the final stage. As far as I'm concerned, until that money is in my bank account, this matter is not complete. So I would like one of you to step forwards and say that you are taking the responsibility to see this process through to the end. Not just do your little bit and pass it on, because that's where it keeps getting stuck, but to see it through to the end. And I said, I would never have agreed to do these sessions if I had known that it would be this time consuming and energy draining to get the money that is now 2 months late and owed to me, right? So the email was like very fucking forthright. It was just like, that's my money, I want it, fucking give it to me, right? I'm not gonna lie, the next day, obviously, I did wake up and think, shit, like, I was like scared to reread it. It's like, God, what have I done? Oliver Twist coding, you've asked for too much, you've asked the authorities for too much, they're gonna whack you over the head with the back of that gruel pan, do you know what I mean? So, I was a bit scared, but I did it. In other words, ladies, to bring me back to one of the key teaching points here, I owned the right to ask the question. I owned the right to the request. I wasn't apologizing anymore for asking for what was rightfully mine. Guess what? The next day, a new manager rings me. I've never spoken to her about it, but you know, hey ho, there's already 10 people involved in this whole debacle, so let's have an 11th. And she goes, oh, you know, I'm Vic. And she said, this issue with your yoga payment has been passed to me. She was super businesslike. She was like, look, I've tried to work out how to do it to pay you as like an external contractor, whatever. There's a million hoops to jump through, as you've already discovered yourself. It's not even worth it. The other way I can get you paid is through your PAYE. Would you be happy for me to sort it that way? If so, I'll have it in your bank account by Friday. Boom. Boom. I could have literally spent another 4, 5, 6 months, and I'm not exaggerating, apologetically asking for that money if it wasn't too much trouble for the next person who needed to sign the next bit of paperwork to get that thing through. Or I could take my power back, ask those managers in a very forthright way to do the honourable thing and make the payment, and for one of them to step up. And sure enough, I got exactly what I asked for. Vic stepped up. She phoned me 3 times that day, and she was like a dog with a bone. And that's the way it should have been. That is the rightful order of the energetics here, right? If you are the one who's provided the service, it is not your job to be begging to be paid for that service. It is not your job, or it was not my job, to keep working out who needed to contact who to get them to sign the next piece of paperwork. My job was to submit the invoices, obviously do the work itself, and then just get paid. So I farmed the job back out to them to do the legwork, for them to make the phone calls, for them to work out how this could happen the quickest. And sure enough, everything shifted. So the way we ask for things massively shifts the odds in the quantum field for us getting the outcome that we desire. The way we ask. You don't get to control, we don't get to control what other people do, the other side of that, but we absolutely get to reclaim the right to state our requests and make our desires. So on Sunday, we will be looking at the archetype of the sacred prostitute. So we'll be looking at Vivian from Pretty Woman. So I will elaborate more on that on Sunday. But there's one part right towards the end of the film that I want to share with you, because it really outlines this point of owning the desire. So right at the end of the film, when her and the Richard Gere character are due to part company, he makes her an offer that, quote unquote, a girl like her couldn't refuse. I.e., he offers to give her a credit card, he offers to put her up in a condo, basically the implication being that she would kind of be his mistress, right? That she would be elevated from the status of the hooker to the status of the mistress. She would have money, she would have clothes, she would have transportation, she would have whatever she needed. But by that point in the film, her feelings for him are too strong for her to accept at a soul level to be this man's mistress. So she turns him down. And he says, well, what more do you want? Like, he's looking at her like, how can you turn this down? This is an incredible offer for a girl like you. And she says, when I was a child, when I was bad, my mum used to lock me in the attic, and I used to dream when I was locked in that attic that there was this knight on a white horse that was going to come and rescue me. And over again, I used to play that scene in my mind that I would, he would scale the wall and he would come and get me and he would take me off on his white horse and we'd live happily ever after. And she says, and in all the times that I had that dream, he never once turned around to me and said, listen, babe, I'll put you up in a condo. And he says, but Vivian, I've never treated you like a prostitute. And she says, you just did. So her dream, her childhood dream, that she's still holding as an adult woman, despite her circumstances, is that she wants the full package. She wants the man who is going to fully show up for her. She wants to find her knight in shining armor. She wants the man that wants to make her his wife. She wants the man who's going to treat her as his beloved. She doesn't want the man who's going to treat her like someone that he occasionally, when he's in town, hooks up with, right? So even though for him it's a no, or it's a no at that point in the film, because he doesn't believe he can give her that level of commitment, she never wavers from her right to hold her desire without compromising it for him just because he's offering her what looks like an incredible deal. But how many times in life when people breadcrumb us, or when people offer us less than we really want, how many times do we take that because we think, well, this is as good as it gets, or you can't really ask for more than this, or what if I'm just, deluded that I think there's more? But when we have the courage to say no to things that other people put on the table for us that feel like breadcrumbs, that's when we gain access to the banqueting hall. I'll say that again. Our ability to say no when other people offer us breadcrumbs, and to not sacrifice our own full desires and the full expression of them just because that person doesn't want to meet them or can't meet them. Our ability to hold them in spite of other people's responses is the thing that makes us a vibrational match for the thing that we really desire. People show up for us in a completely different way when we hold the legitimacy of the ask. So, I think that more or less brings me to my conclusion for today, for this particular segment. What I would like you to do for your homework task today is to journal all the things that you had to beg for in childhood and how it made you feel, what you recall around that. And then I'd like you to journal around any recent experiences that you've had where you have felt yourself asking with the energy of the beggar in whatever subtle way it might have appeared, but nevertheless, you will know yourself when it was tinged with that energy. Start to journal what kind of people bring out the beggar archetype in you. What kind of situations bring out the beggar archetype in you? How does it play out for you now? And see if you can find any links to the ways in which the beggar archetype is showing up for you now and the ways that the beggar archetype played out for you in childhood. Because for sure, if you look for the thread, you're going to find the thread. And then what we're doing in adulthood, thank you, Natalie, thank you so much. What we're doing in adulthood is we are pattern interrupting, okay? Pattern interrupting when those old belief systems are coming in, those lack belief systems. So for example, one of my favourite lack stories is nobody asks me to go on holiday with them. I never have anyone to go on holiday with. I go into a bit of a Cinderella vibe around that particular thing, which is Friday's topic. But I sometimes can hold that begging energy of like, please, please want to do something with me. Please want to play with me. Please want to go out with me. Because in childhood, as an only child, there were no children available in the home to play with. And so I used to go and knock on the door of my friend Danielle. Sometimes multiple times a day if Danielle was at one of her sister's houses who lived elsewhere because they were all grown up. And her dad would answer the door to me, bless him, quite patiently, but multiple times a day when I'd say, is Danielle there, please? Can Danielle play? And he'd be like, she's still at Yvonne's, love. Yeah, she's not back yet, love. Try again in a bit, love. He was always really nice. But it really encoded me with this belief that I have to beg for company. I literally have to beg for company. I have to keep knocking on the door and the door is closed. And there is a gatekeeper, aka Danielle's dad, between me and her being able to play. And that belief is still there for me. Like, I don't have anyone to play with. It's the holidays. I don't have anyone to play with. Who wants to play with me? And then I can really go into that lack belief system and I have to consciously pull myself out of it. And for example, the other day when I was journaling, I was like, well, is it true that nobody asks you to go on holiday? No. My cousin Ben asked me to go on a family holiday to Turkey last week. And if I'd been organised a couple of months ago, I could have gone. My friend Heidi said that she'd love to go on a mini break together, but just not in August because it's too expensive. Somebody that I met online that I said I wanted to go to Portugal, she said, let's go together. I've got a camper van. So there's 3 invitations. So it's not true that the invitations aren't there. But sometimes it's true that there is a flip side to holding or to saying yes to those invitations, which subconsciously we don't want to face. And therefore it's easier to just keep going with the belief that nobody invites me, right? If I had gone on that family holiday to Turkey with my cousins and their clan, I would have potentially had to face feelings of, I don't belong. This is not my branch of the family. I don't have, like, I'm the added person. They've just invited me because they feel sorry for me. I don't fit in, you know? If I had gone on the holiday, I might have had to have then faced a lot of other challenging thoughts and beliefs that might have come up around a big theme in my life of feeling like I don't belong. So sometimes it's easier to tell ourselves, well, nobody invites me. I don't get to go anywhere. Sometimes it's easier to tell ourselves that than to face the energetic flip side of, well, what if I actually do say yes to these invitations? Then what happens? Then what is the up-leveling that I would need to do in order to say yes? So that's another one to really watch, is when we have these lack beliefs, where we believe certain things aren't available to us, is it easier to keep believing that they're not available than to be able to do the energetic work that's required on the other side of actually allowing those things into our lives, right? So I will leave you with those things to ponder. If you're catching this on the replay later, then please do hashtag replay to let me know you're here, and to share any reflections afterwards. And I just invite you to, like, if you have been with me this morning, thank you so much. It's quite a long segment and there's quite a lot in it. So you might want to go out and get some fresh air and just let it settle. Let it settle over the coming days. And don't be surprised if some things come up in your field around the beggar energy. Because if it does, it's the quantum field giving you the opportunity to really look at it and work with it, now that we've brought that archetype so vividly into the light on this share this morning. I'm here if any of you need me. If you're not in the Goddess Ascension group, please do join, just because that's the space where I let people know what's happening in other containers. That's like the landing group. So just hop on into Goddess Ascension if you're not in. I'll put the link in the comments. And I will see you on Friday for the Cinderella archetype. Thank you, Natalie, so much for being here. Thank you, Lindy. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Louise. I think you've just come on now. I really appreciate you being on the live with me. I really appreciate all your comments. It really helps to open my channel. So I can't thank you enough for being here. And let me know later how it's all landing. I hope.